Welcome everyone, it's the Crypto Lark, and I'm excited to have back on the show the good guys from Caleb and Brown, one of my favorite places to buy and sell larger amounts of cryptocurrency. They run an OTC desk and brokerage, and today I'm talking with Jackson. Jackson, welcome on.
Thanks for having me on the show, Lark.
Absolute pleasure. Now, before we jump into the OTC stuff, because that's the real juicy bits that are super interesting, I think, for the audience in terms of what's actually going on out there. It's so hard for us to know with the OTC markets, but I just want to get a quick, hot take from you on what do you see happening in the market right now? What's the current state of the market?
Yeah, so currently, in terms of price action, we're waiting for confirmation of the bottom at $3,200. A lot of people are doing that at the moment, but if you're looking at some of the indicators that are quite interesting, such as the network value to transaction ratio, we're seeing that we haven't quite met the bottom that you traditionally see before a recovery. So over the next couple of days, now that we've broken out of the 50-day EMA and SMA, we've broken out of the resistance. We're going to see it tested as support over the next couple of days, and if we have enough volume, then we might have brighter days ahead.
All about the volume when it comes down to it, at least one of the key indicators. If people aren't buying, if people are kind of scared to be buying and or selling, that's tricky indeed. Now, this is a great segue into the next part of the conversation, which is actually about the OTC market itself, because when you go and look at CoinMarketCap, what is happening on the OTC desks are not represented in this situation. We see the APIs coming in from Coinbase and Binance and all this stuff, but the OTC desks, you guys kind of operate outside of that system. So tell me about the kind of demand you're seeing for OTC buying and selling of cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, so with OTC, it's always very difficult to see what the real transaction volume is like. This is because there's no reporting. Right? Everyone is trading entity to entity. Right? We wouldn't say peer to peer because we're kind of established businesses that traditionally trade OTC. And the reason for this is because you have the customer for OTC trades are usually high net worth investors or businesses or entities. And you'll find that these are more experienced investors and they will be less comfortable with most of the cryptocurrency exchanges, which are traditionally unregistered exchanges and unregulated to some degree. We're seeing that improve a lot more now though. But what you'll find is that investors will perceive these exchanges as risky locations to put their capital, because at any point, if they encounter some kind of solvency risk, if they've been hacked, if some kind of misconduct has happened, they can always use the customer funds to cover up that loss until like the absolute point of failure when everyone discovers it and the money's long gone.
Mm-hmm.
When you're trading counterparty to counterparty, you can ask for that company's financials and you can have a look at that. When you're also trading with someone who's not holding custody of another client's assets, you at least know that for that given period of time, they're not constantly using someone else's money to cover up their tracks. And that's why people trade OTC. That's why the experienced investor will go to brokerages and OTC desks to do their transactions.
And so you get at Caleb and Brown, your minimum I think is about $5,000. Is that right?
Right now, we're trying to constantly reduce that number so that we can bring in more people and get them exposed to the brokerage services. We've brought that down to $2,000 now. So
Great.
for most people, it's actually quite accessible now.
Yeah, and so that's a fantastic thing. You can just call up Caleb and Brown, and if you want to buy $2,000 of the Bitcoin, I think that's a lot more accessible for a lot of investors. But you guys offer much bigger trades as well, and so what are you seeing? Are you seeing more people kind of, okay, I got $3,000 or $4,000, I'm gonna buy some Bitcoin, or are we seeing a lot of people calling up and saying, hey, I need $1 million worth of Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I think closer to the start of this year was when we started seeing the kind of that FOMO diminish, even within the institutional investors. People understand now that in a bear market, there's no longer a rush to put that capital in. So when we have clients who are putting in $1 million, generally what they'll do is they stagger that in. So they have, look, I've got $1 million that I need to put into crypto. That's going to happen over, say, a 6-month time frame. Every time a drop happens, we allocate a certain amount of capital, right? And every time it pumps up a little bit, we might take a little bit off the table.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the value that we provide is actually in taking the investor through that journey and making sure that they follow the strategy that they set in place at the beginning, and take smart approaches to investing rather than, let emotion take them for a ride.
And so that's another great point. You guys are so much more than just hey, you can buy and sell cryptocurrencies here. You're actually about education and helping people move through this crazy crypto ecosystem that we have. Because I can imagine for a lot of the more traditional investors, you have people that have invested in stocks their whole life, and then they come to Bitcoin, and it's a lot different than what they're used to in terms of an asset class.
Yeah, so what crypto has actually done, that's great for society, is that they've gotten the average person a lot more interested in investing and in their kind of financial future. And what we're doing at Caleb and Brown is making sure every crypto investor conducts their behavior like a proper investor. So one of the great values we provide is actually consultation in how to set up your ownership structure, right? A lot of investors go in with investing in their personal name, and for most people, it might actually be beneficial to own things in entities such as a family trust. And we will help investors, take them through that journey, how they should set up that ownership structure and how to structure their portfolio so that they have tax benefits at the end of it. And so that, if they're planning to make hundreds of thousands of dollars, you're going to be paying a lot of taxes. So you need to make sure from the very beginning, you've got that set up properly.
And what about custody services? Because this is something we hear a lot that, well, the big money guys, they're waiting for better custody services to come into play. So is Caleb and Brown using a third-party custody service? Are you providing custody internally, or are you just, sending people a ledger and saying, hey, we'll help you get that set up?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting point. So what we've done is we've actually set up a non-custodial business. And that was really interesting from at the beginning of Caleb and Brown, because we were saying what, everyone who is in crypto needs to learn how to set up their own private keys and know how to have their own financial sovereignty. So we started off as saying, look, we're a non-custodial business, and you need to have all your private keys set up before you transact with us. And what we found now is that this is actually fantastic, because all our clients now are not prone to exchange hacks and other types of risks. So we now help our clients set up their private keys, and in addition to that, we're also helping speak to regulators about the security frameworks that need to take place before we're going to have proper institutional infrastructure in that space. And one of the great things is that we're seeing a lot of custodial services roll out insurance now. There's actually insurance providers that are happy to secure Bitcoin so long as it's set up within their frameworks.
That's actually a really, I think, important nod to the industry and the maturity of the crypto industry overall. Because previously insurers wouldn't go a mile close to Bitcoin. They were totally, we don't know what this is. This freaks us out. But now we see insurers saying, well, there are some situations which we can provide insurance for that asset. That's really important. And we do see custody growing, obviously what Fidelity is doing and a lot of others in terms of offering custody services is a really important step forward. But, not your keys, not your Bitcoin, as we like to say in crypto. So in terms of the investors, I mean, I know we've got institutions and things like this, but what about like the tax situation? I mean, how do you help people kind of approach that? Because this tax time's coming up pretty soon.
Yeah, so one of the things we actually really want to stress is that crypto investors really need to think about their taxes. We found that a lot of people we've spoken to actually are kind of shocked when we say, what's your plan for tax time? So
Taxes, what?
um, yeah, so unfortunately, we still live in societies supported by our governments, and we do need to pay taxes. Um, Now, one of the things you'll really need to be prepared for is having all your exchange exports. You can give them to us, and we can help you set that up into a tax assessment. Um, we generally do a number of these free of charge towards the end of financial year. But then, as the queue picks up, we start charging after the first couple ones. This was last year when people were kind of a little bit shocked about taxes. Um, but now we've got an in-house crypto tax accountant who will make sure all of that's set up for them properly. And I don't want to speak on that too much because I'm not qualified to do so.
Yeah, for sure. That's totally understandable. Just one question. I mean, you guys are an Australia-based company. I mean, can you provide that kind of guidance for like a U.S. person? Because remember, for anyone listening, anyone around the world can call up Caleb and Brown and use their services. So do you have that kind of tax service guidance for non-Australian investors as well?
We can have general discussions about the things they want to look at, but we don't actually offer any tax services to anyone outside of Australia, unfortunately. But that is a good point because I think almost about half of our clients are actually based in the US and plenty of other countries as well.
There you go. Now, recently we have seen some big moves by the banks in terms of cryptocurrency. I mean, obviously, the JP Morgan coin has got a lot of press, and that's something that I think no one's really interested in outside of JP Morgan. But what role do you see banks having in the future of cryptocurrencies? We're trying to, create this new digital money that will kind of move around the banks, but what do you see their role being in the future?
Well, so from our business perspective, we actually understand that there's a lot of friction in onboarding investors and just people into crypto because the learning curve is so high. And we think for the average person or the average person with money, which is generally older clients, they're never really going to bother with holding their own private keys, right? They're never going to bother with cybersecurity. So it's always good to have someone you can kind of trust to handle your settlements and handle your money, at least in an asset class that they can't inflate to infinity.
I think it's, I guess, really important that we as a community need to accept that not everyone is at the same stage in this journey, and some people are very happy to just put $1 million in Bitcoin on their ledger, or 10,000 or 5,000, whatever it might be. But there's definitely people who need intermediary services, who need that sense of trust from whether it be the banks being custodians or just in terms of the payments and things like this, that they want these third parties that they have this existing relationship with, or they have this existing kind of trust with. And now, as well, I wanted to question you about something too. So, you've actually got the chance to see a demo of Signature Bank's private blockchain. So, this was kind of the first to use blockchain settlements before, JP Morgan took the spotlight. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and what role do you think these kind of private blockchain situations will play in the banking situation?
Yeah. So the interesting thing is that the crypto space actually needs the banks to ensure that there's enough liquidity in the markets, because the OTC desks, when we trade with each other, right, one of us is buying and the other one's selling. And as I mentioned before about the solvency concerns, we always want to make sure our settlements clear as quickly as possible, right? So when I'm sending someone Bitcoin, I'm expecting that they're sending me fiat immediately. And because the banking side generally takes 1 to 3 business days for overseas transfers, as the banking industry improves their technology, that actually enables greater liquidity and stronger support for the Bitcoin price. What we're seeing now is that banks are using private Ethereum blockchains. They might not always be Ethereum, but there are banks now already functioning, right? Signet is, I believe, the first example. It's a private Ethereum blockchain. The OTC desks are registered with Signature Bank, and essentially we send each other, Signature Bank USD tokens, and we can then claim them from Signature Bank as United States dollars. So you can think of it in a way like a private network of Tether, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than having that audit concern and the murkiness of Tether, you have Signature Bank.
Well, and these tools I think are really important, and it's not so much for regular people, right? I'm not going to necessarily go and buy some of their US dollars, but for OTC desks, like this is the liquidity in the background. This is what helps all of this work in a way that makes it not take weeks for these kind of transactions to happen. So it's an important part of the overall crypto puzzle, I suppose, even if it's something that regular people might not have see or even have access to.
Yeah, exactly.
Jackson, very, very interesting chat. I know we're just doing a short chat here today about kind of what's going on in the OTC space, but it's super interesting to get these insights from you guys because you're right there at the front line of it and you know what's going on. So thank you so much for sharing your insights with us.
No worries.